Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wonder Goal, the soccer betting podcast from the Action Network. My name is Michael Lieboff. This is our third World Cup preview episode. This one will go over our favorite tournament futures. If you want to get into our deep dives through all 8 groups, you can do that on this channel. But this one will be a little quick hitting. We'll go over our favorite bets to win the tournament, reach the final, semis, etc. Our favorite bets for Golden Boot, Golden Ball, and other player-specific futures. And before I bring in my co-hosts, Anthony DeBundo and BJ Cunningham, a reminder that Wonder Goal is presented by Bet365, the world's favorite sportsbook brand. Sign up with promo code ACTION to get Bet365's exclusive sign-up offer in New Jersey and Colorado. Bet $1 on any game, get $200 free. BJ and Anthony, let's start with the big kahuna to win the World Cup. I'm going to run through the odds real quick as they stand at Bet365. Now, Brazil's the favorite. They're 4-1. Argentina, second favorite, plus 550. France, 6-1. England, 8-1. Spain, just behind them, plus 850. Germany's 10-1. The Netherlands, 12-1. Portugal, 14-1. Belgium, 16-1. Denmark, 28-1. Then we get to a little bit of a jump here with Croatia and Uruguay. They're both 50-1. Senegal's 80-1. So are Serbia, Mexico as well. Switzerland, 100-1. Poland, 150-1. The United States of America, 150-1. Canada, 200-1. Ecuador, 200-1. So are Morocco, Wales. Cameroon is 250-1. So is Ghana. So is Japan. So is Qatar, the host. So is South Korea. Then Australia's 350-1. Iran, 500-1. Tunisia, 500-1. And then the two biggest long shots at 750-1 apiece, Costa Rica and Saudi Arabia. Anthony, I read through them. Let's start at the top. If you're betting a team inside, basically inside Denmark, so we'll say Denmark starts the next tier. Any team below 28-1, who are you backing?
It's really tough to say this year because I think there's no dominant team. I think Brazil is clearly the best team on paper. Everybody went insane when the draw or when the roster came out, and you're like, if you just took the next 10 players from Brazil who didn't make the World Cup team and then put them on the same team, they would probably be good enough to get out of any group in this World Cup because they have so much depth everywhere, so much talent. Vinny Jr., Neymar, Rodrigo, and Antony, and it is a lot of fun to watch. Bruno Guimaraes and Lucas Paqueta. So Brazil's the best team, but you don't make money betting the World Cup by betting on the favorite in a single elimination knockout tournament. Brazil was the best team going into the 2018 World Cup. Most people thought, at least. And then, they got soccered against Belgium, lost 2-1. So they went out. So I tend to look at this from a process of elimination point of view. Why can't Team X win the World Cup? For England, it's the midfield pairing and the manager for me that I'm a little bit concerned with them. Argentina, are they good enough without the ball? I think there's question marks regarding that. I think they have a very complete team, but there's always the defensive question marks too. Then you start looking down the list. France, we talked about it on a group preview pod. We think France is a little bit vulnerable. We don't think that they are as good as the sum of the parts necessarily. When you look at the talent and you compare that to their performances at the Euros, it wasn't that great. And even going back to the World Cup, yes, they won the World Cup and they were awesome, but a lot of set piece goals went into that. So I think you can make the case that maybe they're not quite as good as that World Cup win is suggesting. And you keep going down the list. Germany, defensive issues. The one team that I settled on doesn't have the best path. That's the scary part here. But I think that they were the best team at the Euros by expected goal difference. And of course, we know that they're going to be solid defensively. They're always going to have the ball. They have a ton of midfield depth, which I think is the most important thing in this World Cup because of how condensed it is and the heat. I like Spain, plus 850. They're my favorite. BJ is pumping his fists, so I think I'm out now. But I just think that, look, there's going to be flukes and there's going to be variants either way. And the argument against Spain is that they don't have the finishing, but they were still a penalty shootout from the Euro final last year, where they would have been a favorite against England. They should have won that match against Italy. They were clearly the better side. There are flaws in this Spain team, I think, but when you look at the paper on paper, I think they have the fewest of the flaws of the top teams in this competition. So give me Spain. I understand that they're probably going to have to beat Brazil in the quarterfinals to get there. If they win the group, if they come in second, they might even get a better draw. So it gets more interesting that way. But look, it's the World Cup. You're going to have to beat the best teams to win it. France took out Argentina in the round of 16. They took out England. They took out Belgium. Clearly a very good team. So I'm going to take Spain as my favorite of the teams.
Yeah, I mean, it does beg mentioning, as you said, you don't really make money betting the favorite, but the World Cup does tend to be pretty chalky in terms of who wins it. However, we do see long shots go far. We've seen Uruguay. They made a semifinal about 12 years ago. Turkey and South Korea in the same semifinal. This was before you were born, Anthony, back in 2002. And that was just
I am not that young.
A bananas World Cup in South Korea and Japan. They eventually would lose in that round. So we will see teams go on runs. It's just eventually one of the big dogs usually does take it. I like Spain too if I'm taking a team up there. I actually don't mind Portugal. I like another team in their group too as an outright, because here's the thing with Portugal. It has to click. And if it doesn't click, the floor is very low. And if it does click, like it did in the Euros in 2016, when it was a similar conversation around this team.
That was a luck box run, though. Come on.
Well, what do you need to do in a tournament? This is a tournament. They drew, they got through, and it's just like
they only won one match in regulation.
I know, and they won the tournament. I'm saying if things click for this team, we know the talent's there. It's the number is probably not high enough. I probably won't bet it. It's Spain or Portugal for me at this section, because I think every other team, like you said, if you're betting a favorite. If you're betting these prices, they all have too many flaws. It's too wide open. That's why I would prefer just almost bypass it. BJ, your thoughts here? We know you're going to be betting England.
Yeah, I know.
We know you're going to.
No, I want to say a point about Portugal. The argument for Portugal is a path argument, right? Because even though we don't like Portugal, if they win the group, they have a pretty favorable path to at least get to the semis, right? To play England or to play France. So. For me, I agree with you guys. Spain was the first team essentially that I landed on. Again, the path isn't great. But like Anthony mentioned, like they were the best team at the Euros, like sent throughout World Cup qualifying and the Euros, second best expected goal differential per 90, only to England. They're incredibly possession dominant, like they're slow, they're intricate and everything like that. But what they do is they adopt a lot of principles of like what Pep Guardiola does at Manchester City, where they invert their wingers. Like they really, like they're the most accurate passing team in this entire tournament. So it's very, very hard to get the ball off of them. And then, finishing is one thing. We'll get to Alvaro Morata in the Golden Boot segment. But yes, Anthony also mentioned the midfield of Rodri, Thiago, Pedri, Gavi, Carlos Soler, Sergio Busquets, Koke. Like any combination of that is incredible in the midfield. It can play with anybody in this tournament. So I agree with you guys. Plus 850, I think is a little too steep. Are it's a little too long on Spain, honestly. I think they should be around the second or third favorite to win this tournament. Everybody's going to talk about Argentina, the unbeaten run they've been on, and that's going to be, essentially the talking point that they'll have. But if you go through their results, like, yes, they won Copa America. Like they weren't particularly great against Brazil in that final. Like they haven't really played the most difficult of competition throughout their run. Like they're only a plus 0.9 XG differential per 90 in South America, while Brazil is up at plus 1.4. So it's not like there's actually quite a little bit of a gap between them and Brazil. And also in full roster talent, I don't think they're one of the 3-4 best talented teams in this tournament. Messi, he's Lionel Messi, but guess what? He's 35 and he's been injured for PSG. So he's not going to be 100% coming in this tournament. I know that's going to come back to bite me, but still it has to be mentioned. Now, why I love England to win the World Cup.
We could just clip your Euro preview and put it.
Yeah, you just clip my Euro preview where I gave out England at 7-1 and they lost on penalties. Here's the reality: is that yes, Gareth Southgate tends to play a more slow, conservative, possession dominant style that I know a lot of English fans don't like, and they think it hinders their attacking, prowess. But the reality is they've been the best defensive team in Europe. Like I already mentioned on our other podcast, they didn't concede a goal in the Euros until the semifinals. Like throughout World Cup qualifying, they've only allowed 5 expected goals. Like they are an incredible defensive team. And I actually think their midfield pairing of Bellingham and Rice is outstanding in this type of tournament in terms of guys who can not only stop opposing counterattacks, but also progress the ball, control the tempo of how England wants to play. They should pretty much cruise through their group. And the reality is in this tournament, you're going to want to be on the bottom half of the bracket, right? Because the top half, it's probably going to be Brazil. It's probably going to be Spain, Argentina, the Netherlands, who we also like, in terms of maybe individual bets throughout the tournament, but their price is not good enough to actually bet them to win the tournament, especially given the path. If England wins Group B, they're going to play the runner-up in Group A, which is most likely Senegal. Incredibly favorable matchup for them. Then they're probably going to play France. A matchup that we think that they can definitely win. And then they get to the semis where it's probably going to be any combination of Belgium, Uruguay, or Portugal. Again, another favorable matchup. So then you're getting to a final where you have a chance, obviously, to hedge. So I do the international soccer rankings here at the Action Network. You can check them out. I have England rated as the number 1 team in the world. A lot of that has to do with the fact that if you look at transfermarket.com, they have the most valuable squad of anybody in this entire tournament. The attacking prowess they have with Harry Kane, Bukayo Saka, Mason Mount. They are one of the 2 or 3 best teams in this tournament. And I don't think they should be priced below Argentina and France. So, it sucks that Reece James, Kyle Walker, and Ben Chilwell are out. If they were all in, I'd be like, oh my gosh, this England team is so good. But the reality is that England's a little low at 8-1, in my opinion. So I do like them to win the tournament. Like you mentioned, Michael, favorites tend to win this tournament. You go back to at least 2002. I'd imagine Brazil was the favorite, in South Korea and Japan. 2006, Italy was plus 850. You go to 2010, it was obviously the peak of the Spain's era, and they were obviously the favorite to win that tournament. 2014, Germany was plus 850, and then obviously the last World Cup, France was the favorites at 5-1. So the favorites do tend to win the World Cup. So that's why I'm looking towards Spain and England, because I think they're priced just a little bit too lower than France or Argentina. I really think those two should be above both France and Argentina.
I do think the narrative's gone too far on England.
Yes, it has. That's the thing. Is the media surrounding England is the worst of any team on the planet, right? Because they are so negative anytime anything bad happens, right? Even when it would be like they were calling for Southgate to get fired because of a couple bad Nations League results. And that was the thing I was kind of playing into. I was like, okay, yeah, they haven't been good in the Nations League, but really what the Nations League is for managers to try out different tactics and see what works and what doesn't, and to rotate players. It doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but it's also a good way it's almost like glorified friendlies. So I was hoping people would buy into that and we get England a better price. But yeah, I mean, the narrative around England is that they suck. They play horribly. They're going to lose. It's never coming home. Guess what? Football is coming home, Michael.
I think on the flip side to the narrative has gone too far on them argument is that they played almost every game in the Euros at home.
Right.
Now they got to go to the desert. So I think that has to factor in when we consider how good they were at the Euros. They did go, I think they went on the road for one of their group matches, and then
it was against Ukraine.
Right. And also they had the Scotland match. Right. So
right.
It was, so they played one road match, right? And then, or was that a home match against Scotland?
No, I don't know. But either way, it was on the island.
Right.
Yes.
And then they had the one neutral site match in Rome, and then they were back home for the semis and the final. So I think that factors in. The conditions will not be that great for England necessarily. All their Premier League players not used to playing in 90+ degree heat too often, which is the potential for this game, for this World Cup. But I think, I like Denmark to win that one group. So if you're looking at the path, then it gets very friendly for England if they're able to win the group in the world where they could see Senegal and then potentially Denmark in a quarterfinal and a rematch of what we saw at the Euro semifinal, which, England's clearly better than Denmark. So even though I'll be betting Denmark if that match occurs. I see the case for England, but the number's not quite there for me.
All right, let's skip down to Denmark and beyond, then we'll talk about some long shots here. I think if you listen to our groups E through H podcast, you'll know this. All three of us are pretty high on Uruguay. I think that Uruguay is the best bet in this range at 50-1. I talked a little bit in the groups A through D podcast about Ecuador and how I like South American teams to do well in these tournaments, because it comes down to a couple different things. One, they go to really tough environments throughout their World Cup qualifying, which is incredibly hard. CONMEBOL is notoriously difficult. You go into places like Bolivia or Colombia and playing in these really hostile environments. So I think that these teams should translate well into these kind of weird adverse conditions. The other thing is that these are tournament teams. Like Copa America matters so much to every team in South America. So they play these tournaments, and whereas like the Gold Cup, no, do people care about the Gold Cup in CONCACAF? No. And yeah, the Euros are big, but that's at once every 4 years. So, and the qualifying, nobody cares. Like England plays San Marino. It's not a big deal, right? There's so
Harry
many.
Kane inflates his
Right.
international goal record.
Exactly. There's very whereas in South America, they just play a lot more meaningful games. So I just think these teams are kind of more cohesive in that, and that bears out. We'll see teams like Uruguay make runs. Obviously, Brazil and Argentina are really good teams generally. Chile usually does pretty well when they qualify for the World Cup. So just from like a narrative standpoint, I like Uruguay. Obviously, the talent's there too, like Darwin Nunez, Fede Valverde. They should be well structured in the back. Our man Muslera, him and Memo Ochoa, man, they'll just play in every World Cup from now until the end of eternity in goal for their respective sides. I like this team. They have Suarez and Cavani, both of them. They can kind of rotate. Anthony talked about the conditions. You're not going to play 90 minutes of Luis Suarez every match, but you're not going to do it with Cavani. But like for like switch there. So there's just a ton of signals on this team as they tick basically every box for a long shot that you want to back, and their group is so manageable. Ghana, South Korea, Portugal, who we all admit is a vulnerable favorite in the group stage. So the Sky Blues. I was going to try to pronounce it in Spanish, but my Spanish is terrible, Anthony. Talk to me about Uruguay.
For a second, I thought you were going to talk about the other team you're betting when I said no at the beginning of this little rant, because I thought you were going to mention Stars and Stripes, which have zero.
We'll get there.
They have zero chance of winning the World Cup, zero. But my long shot is also Uruguay. A lot of agreement. We talked about them. We gushed about how much we like them. I love Bentancur and Valverde. I think they're in great form. Yep. I think that the biggest weakness for this team was the midfield, kind of just lacking at the last World Cup and then even the Copa. But they're a major positive regression candidate. They went through a huge finishing slump, still got through qualifying, extremely underrated. I don't think there's a huge gap between them and Argentina. I'm going to be honest. So I think Uruguay is definitely undervalued, and the path is good if they win the group, which I think they're going to do. So if they win the group, you're looking at a pretty favorable round of 16 matchup. And then, I mean, at that point, the quarterfinals of the World Cup are going to be hard, but there's no reason they couldn't make a deep run. So I like Uruguay.
Yeah. And I mean, that stuff doesn't really matter. Every World Cup's different, but they are a team that has the pedigree to get through. They normally get through the group. They're really tough tournament team to knock out because it's the style that they played under Oscar Tabarez. He's gone now. He was there for 15 years though, and so many of these players played under him. So they should be able to manage games too in situations. So Uruguay for us. BJ, are you coming with us on the Sky Blue? Such a cool story too about how this country just produces great players and teams. 3 million people, really small country in South America, kind of at the foot of Argentina, or excuse me, the foot of Brazil and above Argentina. The lovable underdogs who play a very dark art style of soccer.
Right. I mean, for what you get, you hit the nail on the head, right? So Tabarez is gone. Diego Alonso came in after essentially it was a poor run of form throughout World Cup qualifying and also Copa America. And they just went on a run once he got in charge. And what I also love about them with you guys is that they're going to play a 4-4-2. They have good structure defensively, and they can sit back and they can counter a lot of these bigger sides. I mean, we obviously Darwin Nunez is starting to come on for Liverpool. Like, he's averaging the most shots per 90 in Europe this season, which is quite impressive. He'll play alongside Suarez. It'll be a good striking partnership. Valverde is probably the most informed midfielder in the entire world right now. When we get to the player segment, he's one of the guys I like to win Golden Ball. But again, it's just a team with a really good structure, has a good path if they can win this group. And obviously, if they don't, then it becomes a little bit more troublesome. But yes, at 50-1, it's a good price on Uruguay. I also like Denmark at 30-1. I think no matter the path, whether they finish first in Group D or if they finish second, I think they're absolutely a live dog against Argentina. And then, eventually probably will play the Netherlands or the United States. And against the Netherlands, they'll honestly be only a slight underdog. So, and then from there, it's just, like we already said, it's a team that's just very well drilled, been playing together for a really, really, really long time, knows what they want to do tactically, can pressure teams very, very well, can possess the ball, just a really, really good side. So at 30-1, the price maybe isn't that great, but again, if you want to look for a long shot, that's the most likely to win this tournament. It's Uruguay or Denmark would be the two. So yeah, that's where I'm going.
I think for me, the difference between Uruguay and Denmark is that, and I love both teams, but I think Denmark runs into a wall at a certain point where they just don't have the high-end attacking talent to win this. Whereas, like, if we'll talk about this in a minute. Like, I think Denmark is definitely a high floor team that like can easily make the quarterfinals, and I wouldn't be shocked at all. But can I see them beating 2 or 3 really great powerhouses with the lack of attacking talent? Like, they'd have to really magic up some set piece stuff, and they could do that. Like, they're very good on set pieces. It's another reason they get an edge over teams, but I don't quite see the attacking talent. Whereas with Uruguay, you can see a world where Darwin or Luis Suarez kind of, carries, and Darwin hasn't been great at Liverpool, but the underlying numbers are very encouraging for him there. And also the conditions. I think the conditions, Denmark kind of ran out of gas by the end of that World Cup, of the end of the Euro run. Like, they looked really just exhausted by the end of it. They don't have as much depth, whereas I think Uruguay, 1, the conditions are more favorable, and 2, they have a little bit more depth in attack and midfield. So I think I see the case for Uruguay more, even if the path might be a little easier for Denmark, but definitely love Uruguay.
All right, let's talk about USA. I think I wrote them down. I think 150-1, whatever. It's a homer pick. It's a homer pick. Like, why wouldn't
we don't
you
even have a striker?
Why wouldn't you want Ferreira?
We'll do the US thing, but I really think they should just play Brendan Aronson as a false 9.
Tim Weah.
But I mean, I'm going to bet them just as a homer pick is what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's going to be a good bet, but that's going to be another long shot up play. But let's skip ahead now to another way to play them. This is why BJ's playing them much more realistic. We'll look at some future bets to reach, the finals, semifinals, and quarterfinals. We'll start with the Yanks. BJ, they're plus 450 to make the quarterfinals. Lay it out.
I like that bet. Obviously, I love them to get through here in Group B. We don't need to rehash the whole Wales thing from the last podcast. But if the most likely scenario for the United States is they finish second in Group B, which means that they have essentially a match against the Netherlands. And so you have to ask yourself, is the United States really going to be plus 450 on the 2 advanced line against Netherlands? I don't see a scenario where that's happening. So really, it's just a price point where if the United States, and obviously if they win the group, that's even better. They get a more favorable matchup against Senegal or Ecuador. But, the reality is that the United States, they have the talent, right, to at least compete in this tournament, to potentially make the quarters for the first time. And I can't remember how long, but the matchup between the Netherlands is not going to be that great. But again, for me, it's just a price point thing. I think you're going to get to a good opportunity where you can have a ticket on the United States to make the quarters and a minus 250 ticket on the Netherlands to advance. And then you're just sitting there with house money. So that's the way I'm playing the United States, not really saying that I like them against the Netherlands, that they're potentially going to beat them. But I just think the price is way too high for what the worst possible potential matchup is for them in the round of 16.
We already talked about Denmark. You like them to make the semifinals as well, 5-1. And a team we haven't touched on in this one, Switzerland, another quarterfinal bet for you.
Yeah, and again, it's another path argument, right? Because if they finish second in this group with Brazil, which is what most likely is going to happen, they're going to play Portugal or they're going to play Uruguay. And it's another price argument where I don't see a scenario where Uruguay or Portugal is going to be more than really minus 200 to advance for Switzerland. And again, it's like we've already mentioned, it's a very well drilled side. that has been playing together for a long time, can sit in a deep low block, can do well out of possession. Granted, Shaka's in the form of his life right now. He's the catalyst for their entire build-up play. They have good goalkeeping, good center backs and wing backs that, maybe on a club level haven't been that great, but for the national team, they can get up the pitch, they can cause some problems, and they have a good striker in Breel Mbolo. So yeah, at plus 333 to make the quarters. And even if they somehow potentially win Group G over Brazil, they get second place in Group H. So really, it's a matchup against Uruguay or Portugal, where I do not think they're going to be plus 333. So I think you're going to have a great number and a good opportunity to hedge on the Swiss to make the quarterfinals.
Anthony, we talked about Uruguay, so we don't need to talk about your bet about them making the quarterfinals. You like them at plus 240, but you do think the Netherlands have some value here.
Yeah, I mean, of course, a lot of these bets are correlated. So if I like Denmark, if I like Uruguay 50-1 is my long shot pick, and I'm naturally going to think that they're undervalued to get to the quarterfinals as well, because I think they're going to win that group. I like them to win the group. You have to be careful with bankroll management. You don't want to load up on Uruguay to win the group, Uruguay to make the semis, Uruguay to win the tournament, and they lose one game, and you're like, shit, all those tickets are dead. One game they shouldn't, at least. I just think Holland is not getting enough love here in the market for what I think is going to be a very favorable path for them to get through. You could make an argument they're the most informed team in all of Europe. That's kind of been the storyline going into this tournament is, okay, all the European teams seem to be struggling. They're all in panic mode. England has its issues. Germany has its issues. France has injuries. Everybody's going to just fold up shop. Might as well not even show up for the tournament. Holland is like the opposite of that. And I think that the lineup that they could put out there doesn't really have a clear weakness. And this is something we talked about on the group stage pod as well. Where's the weakness? Van Dijk is back. He didn't even play in the Euros. He'll definitely bolster the defense. Cody Gakpo is in the middle of an elite breakout season at PSV. One of the most fun players, young players in the tournament. Memphis Depay, we know we're getting consistent production from him. The fullbacks, Daley Blind is a great passer. Frankie de Jong in midfield, great passer. Dumfries gets up and down the wing very effectively. And the biggest change since the Euros last summer, when I was not a Netherlands fan, is the manager. De Boer is gone. Horrible manager. In comes Louis van Gaal. I don't think Louis van Gaal is, a tactical genius or a savant of a manager, but I think he's a solid international manager who puts his best players on the pitch and knows how to set them up. And I think they're a very dangerous team. So you look at the path, I think their group is not easy. There's no gimme in the group, but they have a clear talent edge over all three of the teams. They win the group. They're likely to get what is generally a pretty mediocre second place finish team out of Group B, which could be the US, Wales, Iran. We expect, even if it's England,
it won't be.
I think
they're not getting through.
Well, that's the worst case scenario, right? The worst case scenario is we're getting the round of 16 against England because either Netherlands slipped up in the group or England did, one or the other. And even in that scenario, I think I will take my chances with the Dutch because I think that they are undervalued here. So they're minus 130 to get to the quarters. They're also plus 250 to get to the semis. You go a little further down the path and you're looking at who could they potentially play. Well, the same way we talked about how England's path was favorable, the Dutch could get a similar situation. They could get Argentina, which would not be a great matchup, I don't think. But again, if you think the Dutch are undervalued, which I do, and I think they're a team on the rise, then it's worth a look to make the semifinals at plus 250 or just to make the quarters at minus 130. I already bet the quarters one, so I will be making that my official pick here, but could definitely see them going deep in this tournament.
I'm going to talk about Japan. They're 20-1 to win. 20-1 to make the semifinal. Let's say they finish in second place in their group, which is also with Germany and Spain. So that feels like if they do get through, it will likely be in second. They would take on the winner of Belgium's group, which could be Croatia, could be Morocco, could be Belgium. No matter what, I think Japan could match up pretty well there and get through. And then if they win that match, it's most likely Portugal or Uruguay. If there's an upset, Serbia or Switzerland. I mean, it's the softest part of the group, of the bracket. And that's part of the reason we like Uruguay, right? So if you like Uruguay, if they win that group and they get supplanted into this quadrant, I think Japan is worth a sprinkle as well, just based on the path. We talked a lot about Japan in the preview pod where we went through groups E through H. they should be a pretty dynamic counterattacking side. If they take on Belgium in that first, round of 16 match, they should match up all right against them, a team that just can't defend their way out of a paper bag. And it's not even worth kind of, projecting too much further past the round of 16, but Serbia, Portugal, Switzerland, I'll take it. Samurai Blue, man. We're going to be losing a lot of money on the Sky Blues and Samurai Blue this World Cup. Let's talk about some player futures now. That's out of the way. This is a reminder. Last World Cup, famously, Michael Leboff nailed Luka Modric at 200-1 to win the Golden Ball. So we'll start with the Golden Ball. Let's talk about the last few winners. In the NHL, you don't win playoff MVP without winning the Stanley Cup. That's not the case in the World Cup. It's a fallacy. Luka Modric won it last year. He was eliminated in the final. Messi, the World Cup before that, final. Diego Forlan out of Uruguay, semifinal. Zinedine Zidane in 2006, even though he got kicked out of the final for headbutting. It was at Materazzi. Final, he was a runner-up. Oliver Kahn, a goalkeeper. Anthony, he's before your time, but he was a goalkeeper for Germany. They lost in the final in 2002. 1998, I believe it was Ronaldo, didn't win. You have to go all the way back to 1994 USA to find the last Golden Ball winner to be playing for the team that won. So it's not, the assumption is it's going to be correlated to what to a team going the furthest. It definitely helps, but it's not an automatic. I'm going to start though, and I want to start because I mentioned Oliver Kahn 2002. So we have seen a goalkeeper win, and I like Jordan Pickford, 200-1 for England. Here's why I like Pickford. He's a shot stopper. He's like a manic goalkeeper. If he has like a big game, he's in your face. Like it looks like you're like, wow, Jordan Pickford made like 7 saves today. He's diving all over the place. That kind of stuff could really like generate a narrative for him. And at 200-1 for Team England, that they're going to be playing a lot of close games, just given their conservative style. So we could see him, win them a penalty shootout or like he did against Colombia in the last World Cup. So I think Pickford, just because of the style he plays, because of the team he plays for, makes sense as a goalkeeper long shot. I'll save my other two for later. We have some agreement in this market too, BJ, including one of your guys.
Yeah, well, the argument for a goalkeeper is, Donnarumma just won player of the tournament at the Euros, right? So there's, and like I already mentioned, England.
And if we think about the I know this is a little apples to oranges, but the Champions League final, right? Who was the player everybody was talking about coming out of that? It was Thibaut Courtois. Like, it's not out of the question here. And like Pickford, like I said, Pickford's style is just so brash, and he really does grab attention. So that's why I think at 200-1, it's definitely worth it.
Has nothing to do with the fact that he's a toffee either.
Hey, look, he's in form.
Yeah, he is.
He's in form.
Been great.
He's been like the best. He's been like the best goalkeeper in the Premier League like this year. If you look at post-shot XG plus minus. Anyway, yeah, I like Federico Valverde at 50-1 to win player of the tournament. If you like, if you're like, I don't really know if I like Uruguay at 50-1. Like, I mean, I don't know if I want to pay that price. Well, then just pay 50-1 on Federico Valverde if you really don't think they're going to win the tournament, because you're not going to find a more informed midfielder that can score goals, can control the middle of the park, that can progress the ball up the pitch. And that when you watch essentially Uruguay, you're like, okay, what's the reason why Uruguay's here in the semis? Or what's the reason why Uruguay's made it all the way to the final? Well, it's because of Federico Valverde. I mean, he has already scored 8 goals for Real Madrid this season in all competitions. And
they're always bangers too.
From a defensive midfield position. So it's the Luka Modric argument, right? Like, Modric obviously was on penalties for Croatia, but he won it from the midfield position because of how well he does in controlling the play, assisting others. And that's exactly what Federico Valverde can do at 50-1. So I love him at 50-1. Another one I like is Pedri at 50-1, like one of the best young midfielders in the entire world right now. If you think Spain's going to go deep, it's probably going to be because of Pedri. He's going to be starting in the midfield. He's their main attacking role, supplier, creator for everything. And, we'll get to the Golden Boot segment, but Spain doesn't have a lot of great finishers on their team. So you don't really have to worry about essentially a striker that's going to score, 5-6 goals in this tournament.
You might.
Well, you might have to worry about it, but in case it happens. But really, Pedri is the one controlling the ball in the middle of the pitch. He's supplying everybody. And if Spain goes deep and they wins it, I believe it'll be because of him. And I think he is their best player at 50-1 as well. And then just a dart throw on Declan Rice at 100-1 for England if they win the World Cup. You know, if you watch throughout the Euros, you say, all right, who was England's best player? Who was England's most important player on the pitch? It was honestly Declan Rice, the way he was able to control possession, control the tempo of the game, stop opposing counterattacks. I think at 100-1 is a fantastic price if England's goal scoring gets kind of spread out like it did at the Euros, where Harry Kane wasn't the one scoring all the goals. You know, it was Raheem Sterling scored quite a bit. So if England goes deep and their goal scoring gets kind of spread out like it did, that definitely brings in a scenario of, like you said, Michael, a Jordan Pickford, a Jude Bellingham, a Declan Rice, someone like that to potentially win the Golden Ball. So those are my 3 dart throws to win the Golden Ball.
Yeah, and that's probably, you know, how you should be playing it, right? Like,
right.
Messi's a favorite. He's 8-1. Neymar's 8-1. Mbappe's 10-1. Benzema's 12-1. Kevin De Bruyne 12-1. Kane 16-1, along with Vinicius Jr. And then Ronaldo's 25-1. You're just going to find the big names are all going to be incredibly overvalued.
And they're also on they're on the best teams, right? So
exactly.
Somebody like Neymar or Harry Kane or whatever. Look at the talent they have around him, where it's not like, oh my gosh, this is the guy. Like, he is going to be the number one focal point of the team. Like, there's nobody else on the team that I can even see potentially winning it. Like, no, like, Brazil has a ton of talent. England has a ton of talent. Messi, you could make an argument for, but 7-1 is way too short to play it, right, even if we don't like Argentina. So yeah, I agree. The other 2 I like, and I like Pedri, but I know you guys do too. So I wanted to just kind of move over one spot and take, I think, Sergio Busquets at 80-1. I don't know how much he'll play, which is a little concerning because he's a little older. But in that same kind of argument that this is a guy who can control a game. He's so elegant when he does it. Very Luka Modric kind of style bet there. And I like Bernardo Silva. We talked about Portugal. I'd rather bet this than Portugal at 14-1 to win the World Cup. Because if Portugal does go, advance deep into this tournament, I think Silva will play a pretty big role, because I don't think it's going to be the Ronaldo show. And he's a really good underrated player. I think you saw how desperately Manchester City wanted to hold on to him. So 50-1 on Silva, who's all action. He's always involved in the box. He'll score. If they're going, he'll be on the score sheet. He'll be setting stuff up. He's a little magician. Anthony, who do you like here?
Yeah, Donnarumma was the player of the tournament at the Euros, but if a penalty shootout had gone the other way,
could have been Pickford.
I think it could have been Pedri.
Ooh, interesting.
Because if Spain beats Italy, we're having a conversation about how, and the only thing that's scary about Pedri is that he's so young that he might just win young player of the tournament. They might just be like, oh yeah, we'll give you that.
That's I like Tchouaméni too, because and the same thing. I'm like, is he? They'll just give him the young player.
Is he better at being young than
the other?
Exactly. It's like, so
same with Valverde also.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. The thing with Spain though is the whole narrative around Spain last year was the Pedri show, and Pedri following in the line of traditional, incredibly ball playing, incredible on the ball, great passing midfielders, the Iniestas and the Xavis of the world. And I think there was, I forget what match it was, but there was a match where he had like 100% completion rate and everybody was like, oh my God. You have to also consider Spain's path. They could very well they're going to play Germany. That's going to be probably the biggest high profile match of the entire group stage. So everybody will be watching it. Narratives are built on matches people watch. If they win that and advance, or if they come in second, they're very likely to have a high profile matchup with Brazil potentially, or Uruguay in the quarterfinals. Again, Spain, Brazil will be billed as the 2 best teams potentially in the tournament, depending on how it breaks. Could also be like the match of the quarterfinals. And then they get to the semis. If they just even make the final, like who on Spain outperforms him to the point where he's not in the mix. So yeah, I like Pedri a lot. So I played him 50-1. That is the only golden ball ticket I'll probably have, just because I like Spain and it's worth a few bucks. But definitely I see the case for Pickford. I think the key is to just kind of build your narrative around how X team wins, and then who's the player that benefits from that. I agree with if it's England, it's
they don't even have
Pickford.
to win. Yeah, it just goes deep, right?
England, Pickford makes the most sense because they're so conservative, and Germany is an interesting case. It's hard to make the case that there's going to be a player that kind of, and we have not talked about them. I feel like we're almost sleeping on them by not discussing them at all.
Well, but when they win,
who's the German player?
Really good.
Who's the German player? I don't even know. Kimmich?
I guess Kimmich or Gundogan, right?
Yeah.
Gundogan's on penalties, so you could make the argument there if he becomes, he gets a couple assists, scores 2 penalties, and dominates the midfield, and Germany gets to the final.
Young player of the tournament, Jamal Musiala will
Is he
have
gonna
a
start?
decent case. I think he will. I think he will start at least one game.
Germany is an interesting case because obviously you have Havertz,
and you don't know who's going to start too. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, Mueller, Sane, and Gnabry.
Gnabry, yeah.
Where does he find his way into that squad? So yeah, Germany's an incredibly interesting team, and one that for Golden Boot, I don't really see it.
I can't
play anybody really, because Havertz has been on a bad finishing form for Chelsea. So yeah. And Timo Werner isn't there too, which sucks because I was going to bet him for Golden Boot, no doubt.
And you would have lost.
I would have lost, but that's okay. We'll get to the best losing Golden
Also,
Boot
we talked about Modric. We have to give BJ a shout out because he gave out Patrick Schick 100-1 last year at the Euros.
Thank God it wasn't. The bet was described as top goal scorer, not Golden Boot, because Ronaldo won Golden Boot because of assists.
Right.
Patrick Schick, unfortunately, is not in this tournament, but
scoring from
he's with us in spirit.
Cash your ticket.
He's with us in spirit.
He's with us in spirit. Let's talk about Golden Boot now. That was Golden Ball, which is given to the player of the tournament, MVP. Luka Modric is the defending champion. Golden Boot. Here are the odds. Harry Kane, 7-1 favorite. He won it last World Cup with 6 goals. Kylian Mbappe
against Tunisia and Peru.
Doesn't matter.
Kylian Mbappe is 9-1. Neymar 12. Benzema 12-1. Messi 12-1. Cristiano Ronaldo 16-1. That's where I'll stop there. Here's the past winners. Harry Kane, like I said, 6. The World Cup before that was a James Rodriguez show. He won it by nailing worldies and set pieces from outside the box. He had 6. Thomas Mueller still playing, still going strong. He's got 1 to his name. In 2010, he had 5. His fellow German Miroslav Klose, 2006, won it on 5. So you need 5 or 6 goals basically to get there, which means you're looking for someone who, you want them to go deep, but it's not a necessity. James made it to was eliminated to the quarterfinals. So, but you also want someone who's going to play 1 or 2 soft matches in their group to pad their account, much like Harry Kane, I guess, did back in the last World Cup.
Golden Boot's the Golden Boot.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a few here. We're all on, BJ and I really like one guy in particular. We'll save him for later. I'm going to throw 2 names out to start. Gabriel Jesus at 35-1 for Brazil. Richarlison was their striker for most of World Cup qualifying and then the Olympics, etc. But he's hurt. He should be back, but who knows how much he'll play. They should score a lot in their group, right? They should dominate a group that has Cameroon, Serbia, and Switzerland. They should be scoring, 6 or 7 goals pretty easily, 2 a game at the as the floor. And I think Jesus is being a little underrated here because there is a wealth of scoring options. I know Neymar and Rafinha, Vinny Jr., they're all there. So that is a knock against the bet, but it also causes the number to inflate. So I was kind of going between Vinny and Jesus, and Jesus was just a bigger number. So I like the Arsenal striker here, 35-1. Another guy I like, Di Maria, Angel Di Maria for Argentina. He's 150-1. And it's a similar situation where I think Argentina should be able to just he's got a good chance where he'll bag 2 in a game in the group stages. Poland, Mexico, Saudi Arabia. They could beat Saudi Arabia 6-1 and Di Maria could walk away with the game ball because he got a hat trick. And you'd be like, would you be that surprised? I know Leo Messi's on this team. Lautaro Martinez, there's a lot of scoring options here too, but Di Maria is 150-1. The number's just too big. So those are my 2 favorite bets on the board outside of the one that BJ will talk about, which is my favorite as well.
Alvaro Morata 50-1. If you've been with us since the Euros, God bless you. But how much we loved Alvaro Morata at the Euros. And the argument is that Spain was the best offensive team at the Euros. They've been the best offensive team throughout Euro qualifying. They're creating close to 2.2 expected goals per match. Luis Enrique loves himself some Alvaro Morata, and he's going to be playing up top for Spain. So I get the striker on the best offensive team in the highest scoring group in this competition. I mean, Alvaro Morata, he almost won the XG Golden Boot at the Euros. He had 4.5 expected goals in 5 matches. And yeah, he struggled finishing, but guess what? He's got 5 goals off of 3 expected for Atletico this season. So actually, his finishing is starting to improve. So yes, if you think Spain is going to go deep, if you like them to win the World Cup, Alvaro Morata at a price of 50-1, and the reason why Bet365 is the greatest sports book in the world is you're not going to find a 50-1 anywhere else on the board for Alvaro Morata. So yes, I am looking forward to watching Alvaro Morata miss chance after chance and lead this tournament in XG, but at 50-1, you have to do it. Like, you have to. And then a couple other dart throws. I like Sadio Mane at 100-1. I thought the price, he's 50-1 everywhere else, but at Bet365, he's 100-1. He's having a good season for Bayern. Like, he's a 0.6 XG per 90 striker. And what Senegal is going to do, yes, they're going to set up more defensive, but he usually would play the left wing role in their 4-3-3 system when they play in Africa qualifying and even Africa Cup of Nations. He's also the African Footballer of the Year the last two times. Is that they're going to probably switch back to a 4-4-2. So he's going to be in a more of a striking role, and he's got a couple, cake group stage matches against, potentially against Ecuador, who might be just playing all out and playing incredibly open, so they can just counterattack them to death. He'll have a match against Qatar where they'll be pretty heavily favored. And honestly, he's still one of the best attacking options in the entire world, right? Like, he had almost his best season for Liverpool last season. He's having a great season for Bayern Munich. He is the number 1 goal scoring threat for Senegal, a team I believe is going to make the round of 16 and potentially give England a scare. So Sadio Mane at 100-1, it's just too big of a price. And then Minamino for Japan. Like, if Japan's going to score a lot of goals, it's going to be because of Minamino. Now that Fukurashi's not, in the lineup, he scored 10 goals throughout World Cup qualifying. Like, he is their main goal scoring threat. And again, like we say with these awards, you're going to want somebody who's on penalties. Alvaro Morata's on penalties. Mane's on penalties. Minamino's on penalties for Japan. And Ike Gundogan is on penalties for Germany. Like, he scored 5 goals throughout World Cup qualifying. And if Germany doesn't have an out-and-out striker, or we don't really know who's going to score all of the goals for Germany, like a dart throw at 151 on Gundogan in case Germany gets a couple penalties and maybe he scores a couple bangers from outside the box. It's not crazy to think that he can win it at 150-1. So the way to play Golden Boot, I think, for this tournament is really just dart throws. I don't really see any of I don't see any value in taking any of the favorites here. I think there's definitely a better path for a lot of the long shots. So those are my 4 dart throws for Golden Boot.
Yeah, I like Mane as well. So I'll be with you on Morata. I'll be with you on Mane. It can be talked about into Gundogan. Pep Guardiola says he's the best player in the world at arriving late in the box as well.
Yeah, the only just third man run merchant.
Yeah, the argument against Gundogan is that he plays a pretty attacking role for City because they obviously dominate a lot of possession. He has to play more defensive, so Kimmich can be kind of the ball supplier and getting forward a little more. But again, if they're going to play Croatia and play Japan, they commit, like Hansi Flick commits a ton of guys in attack. So it's not crazy to think that they're going to commit essentially 5-6 guys up there, and he's going to be right around the box for some of those chances. And again, you obviously get the added benefit of him being on penalties too.
I think we're going to need 5 or 6 goals per game in the Spain, Germany, Japan, Costa Rica group to cash all those tickets we just mentioned.
Alvaro Morata and a Gundogan hat trick.
Yeah,
and
Minamino. Maybe it'll be a dead heat between Morata, Gundogan, and Minamino.
They'll all have 5 goals coming out of the group, all against Costa Rica. Now, I agree on the Morata thing. The most interesting thing, okay, so who took the most shots at Euro 2020, played last summer? The top 5. Number 1 was Dani Olmo. Then it was the Italian trio, Insigne, Immobile. The next person on the list after the Italian trio and Dani Olmo and Chiesa was Alvaro Morata at 16 shots. He had the second most non-penalty expected goals. Sterling was number 1, which I think is also interesting. But also you have to remember who was 7th on the list. It was Braithwaite, Schick. After that, Gerard Moreno, who has not been in form and not been fit. If his minutes go down, that only makes more room, more chances, more shots for Morata. And you mentioned Luis Enrique and why he loves Morata so much. It's because Morata is so good at everything else That's why he's a top class striker. He's so good at coming short, linking the play, combining, receives a ton of progressive passes. I wrote about Spain in our team by team previews, and I talked about this. Morata does so much well that you can get past his inconsistent finishing. Do I think he's become a plus finisher this year? I know BJ said that. No, but like you can run hot for like a week and you can win the Golden Boot.
Right.
So
plus it's 50-1. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
He's on the best offensive team in this tournament.
Yeah. So it is Morata or nothing there for me. I'm on Morata. There's a couple other flyers BJ wants to talk about. There's one that I thought was interesting, which is highest goal scorer on England at plus 700 is an interesting flyer. And I think it's interesting for two reasons. One, Sterling tends to kind of come in like a 2-ish type. So England's biggest problem under Southgate is that they don't get enough creation, right? So Kane, his instinct and his tendency is to come short because he's such a good passer and distributor. He comes short or comes deep rather, and collects the ball away from the goal. And then the attack kind of suffers for it. But who benefits from that is the wide forward who plays to his left or to his right, which is Raheem Sterling most of the time. We know he's banged on for minutes. We know Southgate loves him. He had excellent numbers last summer. He's been pretty good for Chelsea this year. And I don't think there's going to be a ton of goals in that group. So I don't think there's going to be high flying action with all these penalties and chances for Harry Kane to get his lead. So at 7-1, Sterling to be England's top goal scorer is an interesting wager that I will be betting, because I just think that the gap between him and Sterling and Kane is not as big in a group where you're not expecting a ton of wide open goal scoring and penalties. So that's my potential angle there.
BJ, anything else for you in these kind of derivative markets to the Golden Boot?
So there's a market on Bet365. It's top goal scorer in one of the big European leagues. So top goal scorer from the Bundesliga, the Premier League, La Liga, Ligue 1, and Serie A. Sadio Mane is sitting there at 20-1, which I think is kind of a crazy price when you look at all the other strikers, essentially, that people that are in there. Like Andre Silva is the favorite at plus 750. Then you have like
not going to start.
You have all the Germany players, like who's actually going to, Gnabry, Sane, Mueller, like all of those guys. And you have just Sadio Mane, who's the number one striker for Senegal. Like you already said, he's got, if I like him 101 for Golden Boot, I love him in this market at 20-1. Like, I don't understand why he's not the favorite here. You look through the market, who on this market is going to essentially, are you like, oh my gosh, that guy is definitely going to outscore Sadio Mane? I mean, Jude Bellingham is sitting there at 20-1 right next to Mane. He's a defensive midfielder. He's not going to score very many goals for England. Andre Silva's the favorite. Gnabry's at plus 750. Daniel Malin, he might start alongside Depay, but he's been out of form for Dortmund. Ademi's not going to play for Germany. So you look through this. I mean, 20-1's a crazy price for Sadio Mane, who's going to be on penalties in a soft group. So yeah, I love him for that. And then also just put me down for Ike Gundogan, top goal scorer for Germany as well.
Lovely stuff, gentlemen. All right, that will wrap up our tournament futures preview. A reminder, you can listen to our group deep dives A through D and then E through H as well on the Wondergoal channel. We'll also have a special episode just looking at Team USA from a market perspective, their chances, etc. Later on this week. But until then, for BJ Cunningham, for Anthony DeBundo, Michael Leboff, saying best of luck with all your bets.